This video will show you how to change fractions to decimals, decimals to fractions, fractions to percents, percents as fractions, to change decimals to percents, and percents back to decimals. Because fractions, decimals, and percents are just different ways of writing the same numbers, there are rules that we have for changing them back and forth. After I go through the rules, I will give a couple of examples why these rules work. So, to write the following fractions, mixed numbers, improper fractions, as decimals, remember fractions, mixed numbers, and improper fractions are just different ways of writing fractions. In order to do that, we need to remember that the fraction bar actually does mean to divide. So if I were to rewrite the first fraction using division, I would rewrite it as 3 divided by 4. And as you can see, I put in the middle here, I use a little symbol to help myself remember which number to divide which number by. So it's 3 divided by 4. If I were to do this writing it out, that means how many times does 4 go into the number 3? And if I divide this either on my calculator or by hand, I will end up with 4 times 7 is 28. Do my subtracting. Bring down my next 0. I will end up with 75 hundredths, or 0.75. So in simplest description, the rule for changing a fraction to a decimal is to simply divide the numerator by the denominator. It will work every time. So let's look at the next one. The improper fraction 11/5. We're going to divide 11 by 5. 5 goes into 11 twice. With 1 left over, using short division, 5 goes into 10 twice, with 0 left over. So 11/5 is equivalent to 2 2/10, or 2.2. 19/20, I have to follow the same procedure, except I'm doing 20 into 19. And again, if I have a calculator, this goes pretty quickly. I just have to type in 19 divided by 20 on my calculator, and I will get my answer. So if we round this, 20, if we look at this as a 190, 20 into 190 goes 9 times. Don't forget your decimal point. 9 times 20 is 180. Subtract that from 190. We get 10. Bring down the 0. 20 goes into 100 5 times with 0 as a remainder. So 19/20 is equivalent to 95 hundredths. The other thing I just wanted to point out is try to remember that on the second example here, 11/5, we could also rewrite that as a mixed number, which would be 2 1/5. So if you think to yourself this is equivalent to 2 1/5, you can also just divide the 1/5 portion, end up with the 0.2, and remember that your whole number you've already taken out. Just don't forget to put it back in. So to change a decimal to a fraction, what you need to do is make sure that you understand your place value. So the secret to saying 0.25 properly, we do refer to it as 0.25 because it is a quick way of talking about the number, but it actually means 25 hundredths because the 5 is in the hundredths place. So if you can remember the place value and you say the decimal properly, you end up with 0 and 25 hundredths, which simplified would be the same as 25 over 100, and if we put that into simplest terms, divide both by 25, we end up with 1/4. So to change a decimal to a fraction, you need to use place value by identifying the digit furthest right in the decimal, and that will tell you what your denominator is. So your denominator will always be over 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, multiples of 10, because those are the places using our decimals. So the next example, 0.6, If we were to change that to a fraction, 0 and 6/10, we drop the 0 out because it just ends up taking extra space, and we certainly don't write 0 before every number that we count. So 0 and 6/10 is equal to 6 over 10 as a fraction. So I've put my 6 over 10 because it's in the tenths place. I reduce by dividing the numerator and denominator by 2 because I know that is a common factor. And in simplest form, 0.6 is equivalent to 3/5. My next example, 0.075. If I name this decimal properly, it is 0 and 75 over the place that the 5 is in, 1,000. So I have 0 and 75 over 1,000. And then I just have to put it into simplest terms. So again, the key to finding the denominator is you place the decimal part over the place value. We drop out the 0. We can divide both of these by 25. 75 divided by 25 is 3. 100 divided by 25 is 50, and we end up with 3/50. Oops, no we don't. That is a mistake. 75 divided by 25 is 3. 1,000 divided by 25 is 40. Silly me. So it's 3/40. 0.75 is equivalent to 3/40. In the last example that I have down here, 2 and 4/10. So I keep my whole number the same, and I know I'm going to have a mixed number because I have a whole number to the left of the decimal point here, and I have a decimal part to the right of the decimal point. The decimal part is what becomes the fraction part. So I bring my 2 over. 2 and 4, what place is it in? It is in the tenths place, and then I simplify by dividing both my numerator and my denominator by a common factor. Because they are both divisible by 2, I end up with 2 and 2/5. So in summary, to change a decimal to a fraction, keep the whole number the same. It becomes the mixed, the whole number part of the mixed number. The decimal part, which is to the right of the decimal point, becomes the fraction. Okay, so the next one is to write fractions as percents. To change a fraction to a percent, the easiest method is really to change it to a decimal and then just multiply by 100. So we divide 3 by 4, and we get 0.75, multiply by 100, and we end up with 75%. The next question, 1 divided by 5, is 0.2, which is 0 and 2/10. Multiply that by 100, and we get 20%. So in the first one, 3/4 is equivalent to 75%. 1/5 is equal to 20%. 5/8 5 divided by 8 is 0 and 625 thousandths, 0.65. Multiply that by 100. Remember, when we multiply by 100, we just move the decimal point 2 places to the right because we have 2 zeros. 62.5%. Now in our last example, it's 1 and 2/5, so I've gone over 1 whole, and the 1 whole fractional equivalent is 100%. So 100% actually represents the entire amount. So we've gone over our 1 whole. So we know we're going to have a percent that is over 100. So if I change 1 and 2/5 to a decimal first, right, I can divide 2 by 5 on my calculator, or I can do it by hand. That means how many times does 5 go into 2, which is 0.44. 1.25 is equal to 1.4. Multiply that, multiply 1.4 by 100, meaning I move the decimal point. I have to add a 0 there, and I get 140%. So 1 and 2/5 is equivalent to 140%. So to change a percent to a fraction, all we need to do is take the number of the percent and put it over our total number of percentages in one whole, which is 100. So we rewrite 25%, we put it over 100, and we simplify. 25 divided by 25 is 1, 100 divided by 25 is 4. In simplest terms, 1/4. So 25% is equivalent to 1/4. Second example, take 42, place it over 100 because that's the total number of equal percents in one whole. Simplify. 42 divided by 2 is 21. 100 divided by 2 is 50. I have to just make sure that this is in simplest terms, and I know because 21 and 50 only have one common factor. Their only common factor is 1, so I can't simplify any further, because if I divide them both by 1, I'm going to end up with the same thing. 5%, we'll take the 5, place it over 100, put them in simplest terms. 5 divided by 5 is 1, 100 divided by 5 is 20, so 5% is equal to 1 over 20, or 1/20th. Same with 99%, 99 over 100. That is actually in simplest terms. 215% might be a little bit trickier because I'm going to end up with an improper fraction, but I can then change it to a mixed number. 100 goes into 215 twice, with 15 left over. And if I put that into simplest terms, I keep my whole number the same and reduce the fractional part. 15 divided by 5 is 3, because I know 5 will go into 15 and 100. And 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 2 and 3/20 is equivalent to 215%. So now you know how to change percents to fractions. Okay, so next we're going to write decimals as percents, and I love this one because it's so simple. All you need to do is multiply your decimal by 100 and add the percent sign. So 0.5 times 100, we move the decimal point 2 places to the right and add our 0, we end up with 50%. So if you think about it, 0.5 is also equivalent to 1/2, if we just think to ourselves. And 1/2 is equivalent to 50%, because 50% is half of 100%, which is our entire whole percent. 64 times 0.64, or 64 hundredths times 100 would be 64, add my percent sign, and you've got it. 0.08 multiplied by 100 is equivalent to 8%. 1.9 multiplied by 100, 190%. Again, we don't typically go over 100% when we're using percents, but we do need to know that they are equivalent to numbers that are greater than 1 when we change them to decimals. Okay, so finally we're on our last one here. We're going to rewrite the following percents as decimals. So if I want to change a percent to a decimal, I simply take my percent, number represented in my percent, which is 55. Oops. And I divide by 100, which is the inverse of what you did to change a decimal to a percent. So 55%, we take 55, divide by 100, right? Which means, don't forget, your decimal point is always to the right of the whole number. You move your decimal point 2 places to the left. 55 divided by 100, 0.55, and you've got it. 90 divided by 100, 0.9. So 90% is equal to 9/10, which is the proper way that we say this decimal, or 0.9. 4 divided by 100, just be careful here. Don't forget to add your 0, because you have to move your decimal 2 places to the left, and you end up with 0.04. So 4 hundredths is equal to 4%, or 0.04. 37 divided by 100, 0.37. So 0.37 is equivalent to 37%. And lastly, when we have a number over 100%, we still follow the same rule. 115 divided by 100. Don't forget your decimal point is just to the right of the ones place. It's always there, even though we don't always write it. Divide by 100, we end up with 1.15. So 1.15 is equivalent to 115%. So I hope this helps you out as a summary of how to write fractions, decimals, and percents as each other. And again, this doesn't really go into the theory behind why these things are true, but it is a great little summary, hopefully, to help you remember how to change them back and forth.